Someone once said, if you're living in darkness, don't lose hope. One day the light will find you, pulling you out of the abyss life has thrown you into. But for Elena Cruz, light felt like a luxury not meant for her. After the sudden death of both her parents in a car accident, 18-year-old Elena was sent to live with Aunt Brenda and Uncle Carl, relatives in Los Angeles. Just 3 days after the funeral, her life was thrown into chaos. While running a simple errand at a nearby convenience store, she was kidnapped by strange men and taken to a shady bar in downtown LA. No one explained anything. No one came for her. There, Elena was forced to work as a bar waitress, but in truth, she was no more than a prisoner. The manager shouted orders constantly. The male staff looked at her with sick eyes. If you'd just dance or entertain the clients, you'd be making real money, the manager spat at her every time she refused to cross a line. But Elena refused to bend. I'd rather live poor than sell my dignity, she told herself every day. Despite the constant insults, threats, and even slaps across the face, she clung to the last bit of pride she had left. Every night, she cried silently in a tiny back room no one ever entered. No one ever heard her weep. Once, when a male coworker touched her inappropriately, she fought back and got punched so hard her face turned purple. No one defended her. No one cared. In just a few months, Elena felt as though she had aged years in hell. Desperation grew. She tried to escape once, but each time she reached the back door, someone appeared. They dragged her back, threatening worse if she ever tried again. "You were sold to us," one of them hissed. "We own you. We can do whatever we want." That sentence etched itself into her soul. Elena didn't know who had sold her, but a terrible suspicion started to form. Could it be her own Aunt Brenda and Uncle Carl? Day by day, Elena grew quieter. She spoke less. The flicker of hope inside her dimmed. She had once been a girl with dreams. She had wanted to go to college, become a painter, live a life filled with color and freedom. Now that dream was buried beneath tears and bruises. One night, after being screamed at and forced to work back-to-back shifts during a loud party, Elena stood behind the bar, her hands trembling around a glass. Her eyes swept across the noisy crowd, laughing, drinking, living, while she remained a shadow, trapped in a place where no one cared if she existed. What she didn't know was that sitting quietly in the corner was a man who saw her, saw the sadness behind her eyes that looked like they were silently begging for rescue. And those eyes were about to change everything. That night, Elena stood silently behind the bar, her eyes unfocused, her mind floating far from the chaos around her. The pounding music, drunken laughter, and clinking glasses all blended into one meaningless noise. "Excuse me," a calm male voice said. Elena looked up. In front of her was a young man, dressed simply but respectfully. His eyes weren't like the others who came here. No hunger, no judgment, just quiet observation, gentle yet piercing. "My name's Daniel," he said, glancing at the small name tag on her chest. "Elena, that's a beautiful name." She nodded slightly, forcing a faint smile before turning to get the bucket of beer he asked for. Moments later, she placed it on the table in front of him. "Here's your order, sir. Enjoy." "Thanks," Daniel replied, his eyes still gentle. But Elena turned away quickly, not wanting anyone to notice her too much. Throughout the night, Daniel stayed at his table. He didn't drink much, didn't ask for anything else. He just watched Elena from a distance. He saw it in her eyes, the deep sadness, the lifeless stare, and something inside him tightened. The following days, Daniel came back. Always sat at the same spot, always watched her quietly. Never once did he speak to her disrespectfully. No flirting, no sleazy comments, just presence. And oddly enough, it gave Elena a strange sense of safety, though she wouldn't admit it. Until one night, Elena accidentally spilled a drink on a female customer. Shouting erupted, accusations, blame. As always, it fell on her. "You can't do anything right," the manager barked before slapping her across the face in front of everyone. Daniel shot up. "Stop," he yelled, his voice sharp as a blade. All eyes turned to him. He walked quickly to Elena, stepping between her and the manager. "Don't touch her again, if you have even a shred of decency." "She belongs to me," the manager growled. "She's a person, not a possession," Daniel fired back. Then he turned to Elena, his voice steady. "You don't have to stay here. You deserve a life." Elena froze. Her eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Who are you?" "I'm someone who can get you out," Daniel said gently, "if you want to leave." Just a few days later, Daniel returned, this time with a check for $100,000, 0 cents. He handed it straight to the bar owner in front of everyone. "I'm not buying her," he said loudly. "I'm buying back her freedom." Elena stood still, not knowing whether to cry or run. Her mind was spinning. She had never thought anyone would care, let alone sacrifice like this. When Daniel reached out his hand, she stared at it for a long time. Could this really be happening? For months, she'd begged silently for someone to see her, and now someone finally had. And then, for the first time after months of living in hell, Elena nodded. Slowly, hesitantly, but with resolve. After being redeemed, Elena stood frozen. Everything happened too fast, too suddenly. In her hands now was a chance to escape the place that had killed her youth and dreams, but at the same time, it meant stepping into the complete unknown. She didn't know who Daniel truly was. She didn't understand why he had done this. But one thing Elena knew, she had nothing left to lose. No family, no home to return to, no hope waiting for her anywhere else. So when Daniel opened the car door and gently said, "You can choose to leave," she slowly followed him, not because she trusted him, but because for the first time in months, she felt like a human being again. The car came to a stop in front of a quiet house nestled atop the Hollywood Hills. Elena peered out the window, her chest heavy with uncertainty. The soft porch light spilled across the driveway, casting gentle shadows, like a warm glow welcoming her into a world she had never known. "We are here," Daniel said softly from the driver's seat. Elena nodded, gripping her small cloth bag tightly. It held everything she owned, a few worn clothes and a nearly shredded sketchbook. Each step she took from the car felt like entering another realm, a world so peaceful it didn't feel real. The house was large but modest, cream-painted walls, dark wood doors, ivy-covered fences. The golden light glowing from inside felt like the embrace she never had during countless cold nights. Daniel held the door open. "Make yourself at home. This is your house too, if you want it to be." Elena didn't know if she could believe it, but something deep inside her, small, flickering, wanted to try. She didn't reply, just nodded cautiously. She had grown used to kindness hiding traps. Promises in her world were always conditional. Inside, the scent of oak and lavender calmed her senses. The living room was cozy, soft gray couches, a tall bookshelf filled with novels, and abstract oil paintings hung on every wall. From the kitchen, an older woman with neatly pinned gray hair stepped out. Her face was warm, eyes kind and observant. "Oh, hello, dear," she said. "I'm Margaret. Just call me Ms. Margaret." "This is Elena," Daniel explained. "She'll be staying with us for a while. Please help her settle in." "Of course," Margaret smiled gently, patting Elena's shoulder. "You're safe here, sweetheart." That night, Elena was shown to a quiet room upstairs. It had a large window facing the city. Fresh sheets, lavender-scented pillows. She stood awkwardly at the door, afraid to touch anything, as if she might ruin the calm with her very presence. She didn't sleep. Though exhausted, her mind churned with questions. Why would Daniel help me? Could this be another trap? Is it possible someone is truly kind to someone like me? But the next morning when she came downstairs, a steaming mug of tea was already waiting. No pressure, no expectations. Just Miss Margaret, smiling gently. "Did you sleep okay, dear?" Elena murmured. "Sort of." Daniel appeared shortly after, nodding a polite greeting. He didn't pry, didn't demand. It was as if saving her had been no big deal at all, like it was something he'd always do. The first 3 days, Elena barely spoke. She spent hours on the bedroom balcony, holding her sketchbook. Its pages were empty, yet she turned them, searching for pieces of a self she'd lost long ago. Ms. Margaret would sometimes bring small plates of cookies or fruit. She never hovered, never asked questions, just placed them nearby and left. That quiet care soothed something deep within Elena. No strings, no obligations. On the 5th afternoon, Elena quietly made her way to the kitchen sink to wash dishes. But before she could turn the faucet, Miss Margaret appeared. "What are you doing, dear?" Startled, Elena replied, "Just wanted to help a little." "Daniel specifically asked me not to let you do anything," she said warmly. "You need rest. It's easy to work. Loving yourself, that's the real challenge." Elena froze. The simple words made her throat tighten. She nodded slowly and returned to her room. That evening, Daniel invited her out for a bite, not to a fancy restaurant, but a quiet diner near the lake. On the drive home, he asked gently, "Do you regret coming with me?" Elena was silent for a few seconds, then answered softly, "I don't know. I don't think I deserve anything good." Daniel looked over. "You don't have to deserve it. You just have to exist and be happy." His words weren't flowery, but they cracked something open in her heart. For the first time, someone had told her she didn't need to earn love. That night, she cried, not from pain, but because for the first time in a very long time, she felt alive. The weeks that followed passed quietly and gently, so unlike anything Elena had ever known. Each morning, she woke not to shouting or pounding music, but to soft sunlight slipping through the curtains and the smell of toast drifting up from the kitchen. Daniel always kept a respectful distance. He never asked too many questions, never pushed her to say what she wasn't ready to share. But his presence was constant, gentle, steady, like a lighthouse she hadn't known she needed. They started talking more, sometimes in the living room, sometimes at the dining table, or simply while tending to the potted plants on the balcony. Daniel didn't try to fix her. He didn't offer empty advice. He just listened and stayed. One late afternoon, with the sky painted in soft pink hues, Elena was doodling in her worn-out sketchbook when Daniel approached. "You still love to draw?" he asked softly. She nodded. "I used to want to be a painter. And now?" She hesitated. "I'm not sure. It feels like everything beautiful I once dreamed of left me." Daniel paused before replying quietly, "Then let's bring them back, a little at a time." Her heart skipped. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the sincerity behind them. He wasn't promising magic, he wasn't painting false hope, he was simply guiding her back to something she'd lost, herself. Daniel never rushed anything. He moved gently beside Elena, sharing quiet mornings with tea on the balcony and peaceful evenings watching the news in the living room. There were no sudden declarations of love, no pressure or expectations. He was simply there, present, patient, and constant. One afternoon, as Elena sat sketching faint lines into her old notebook, Daniel joined her on the stone bench in the garden. The late sunlight shimmered in her hair, casting a soft halo around her like a quiet crown. He watched her for a while before speaking, his voice almost a whisper. "I think I've fallen for you." Elena looked up, eyes wide, searching his face. There was no jest in his tone, no hint of insincerity, just honesty, bare and quiet. "You know, I'm not like other girls, right?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled gently. "I'm not looking for someone ordinary. I just want you to be happy, if you'll let me be a part of that." Her heart trembled. She had never imagined being chosen, being loved, so tenderly. After a pause, she nodded slowly. Then, "I'll try." From that moment, they were a couple, but everything between them remained simple and unhurried. Daniel didn't take her to fancy places or spoil her with lavish gifts. Instead, they strolled around the neighborhood park in the evenings, picked out small things at the corner store, or read quietly together in a cozy cafe. For Elena, it wasn't just new experiences. It was her first time truly living. It was her first time choosing a dress without needing anyone's permission. Her first time walking into a movie theater without fear of being judged. The first time she saw her eyes in the mirror not as hollow, but quietly hopeful. Still, the past didn't let go easily. Some nights she woke from nightmares, breathless and afraid. Sometimes she flinched at Daniel's gentle touch, startled by memories she couldn't control. Each time, he never got upset. He simply held her hand, silent and steady. His presence was his promise. I'm here. You're not alone. One afternoon, Elena sat in the kitchen with Ms. Margaret, peeling apples side by side. She spoke of her mixed feelings, newfound joy tangled with lingering fear. Ms. Margaret placed a warm hand over hers and said gently, "Sweetheart, the past isn't a chain unless you keep tightening it. You have every right to walk away from it and live the life you deserve." Elena stayed quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "I'm learning. Slowly, but I'm learning." That night, after returning from a movie, Elena reached out and held Daniel's hand in the car. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. Daniel looked at her, smiled, and squeezed her hand softly, like a quiet vow. For the first time, Elena began to believe she was worthy of love. Elena had started to settle into her new life, a life where she no longer had to look over her shoulder, no longer had to brace for shouting or disgusted stares. Peaceful mornings, birdsong by the window, and walking hand in hand with Daniel through the park made her feel like she was finally coming alive again. But deep down, she knew one truth. The past doesn't let go so easily. And then it returned. One morning, while Daniel was out for work and Elena was helping Miss Margaret prepare lunch, the doorbell rang. Standing outside the gate were two people Elena never thought she'd see again, Aunt Brenda and Uncle Carl. They smiled with fake warmth, holding a bag of fruit like friendly visitors. "Sweet Elena," Brenda cooed, voice dripping with sugar. "We missed you so much. We came to take you home." Elena froze, her breath caught in her throat. Memories slashed across her mind like knives. She said nothing, but her expression changed, cold, furious, and unshakably clear. "There's no home for me with you," she said calmly, voice sharp as glass. "You're not my family. You sold me." Carl tried to keep his face neutral. "Elena, you're confused. You ran away. We only want to help." "Don't," she snapped, eyes blazing. "I remember everything. I'm not insane like you hoped I'd be. I remember you arranging it all, sending me off to them for money." The air turned thick with tension. Miss Margaret stepped forward, shielding Elena slightly. "You should leave," she said firmly. "No one here welcomes your lies and cruelty." Brenda forced a smile. "Family is still family, darling. You'll come to your senses." But Elena had already turned away, her heart pounding, not from fear, but fury. What she didn't know was that this confrontation was only the beginning. 3 days later, she and Miss Margaret visited the local farmer's market. The atmosphere was bright and full of laughter, the scent of fruit, fresh bread, and flowers floating through the air. Elena felt at ease again, almost forgetting the visit that had shaken her so deeply. But in just a heartbeat, it all shattered. From a black van parked at the edge of the lot, 2 men jumped out. Swift and silent, they grabbed Elena, one covered her mouth, the other locked her arms. Ms. Margaret screamed, grabbing for Elena's sleeve. "Elena!" she cried out, panicked and powerless. The van door slammed shut, tires screeched, Elena disappeared into the blur of traffic and fear. She was blindfolded, wrists bound tightly. The van drove for what felt like forever, bumping along unpaved roads. When they finally stopped, Elena was dragged out into what felt like an abandoned building or warehouse. The air was cold, the wood groaning with every gust of wind. They threw her to the floor. Rough concrete scraped her skin, the ropes cutting into her wrists. After a while, footsteps echoed. Then a voice she could never forget. "She's worth more now," Uncle Carl said with a laugh. "You know who Daniel Carter is? A quiet millionaire. He'll pay up." Aunt Brenda's voice followed, sweet and venomous. "Our dear niece, you should be grateful. Thanks to you, we'll be living comfortably. 200 grand. That's no small deal." Elena didn't respond. She didn't cry. The fear that once paralyzed her had lost its grip. What remained was clear focus. She knew she couldn't be weak. Not this time. In the darkness, she whispered, "Daniel will come. And this time, you won't get away." When the phone rang, Daniel was in the middle of an important meeting with key partners, but the moment he saw Margaret on the screen, something in his gut twisted. He stepped outside and picked up. "Daniel," Margaret's voice was broken, barely able to breathe. They took Elena, right in front of me. They pulled her into a car. I couldn't stop them." Daniel froze. His blood felt like ice for a second, then his heart began to pound like war drums. Elena, the woman he had just begun to love, just started to build a life with, was gone. Kidnapped. And this time, it wasn't a shadow. It was real. "Did you see the license plate?" "No, I just remember it was a black SUV, probably a rental, all tinted windows." Daniel didn't waste a second. He hung up and immediately called the police. But deep down, he knew waiting for paperwork, waiting for slow investigations, could cost him everything. He raced home, stormed into his office, opened his laptop, and pulled up security feeds from the area near the market. At the same time, he called Miles, his longtime friend and a trusted private investigator. "I need you. Elena's been kidnapped. I can't lose her." Miles didn't ask for details. He simply replied, "Send me coordinates. I'm on my way. We'll find her." Meanwhile, Elena was shoved into the back of the SUV. Her wrists were tied behind her, a blindfold wrapped tightly across her eyes. The smell of old leather and cigarette smoke choked her. The man beside her muttered, "As long as he pays up, you live. Otherwise, it's on your luck, girl." Elena stayed silent. She bit her lip to keep from crying. She knew if she showed fear, they'd use it against her, but deep inside, panic was crawling up her spine. She didn't know where she was being taken, if anyone knew she was gone, if Daniel even realized, but she held on to one fragile thread of hope. He'll come. He had saved her once. Maybe, just maybe, he could again. After nearly 3 hours of tracing camera footage and signal pings from a possible surveillance device, Miles narrowed it down, a series of abandoned warehouses east of Los Angeles. Daniel didn't wait for backup. He drove straight there, carrying a duffel bag filled with a mix of real and fake cash. He didn't care what it cost. He would bring Elena home, no matter what. The sky was a dull gray. Rain had begun to fall lightly as Daniel turned onto the dirt road leading to the warehouse. Everything around him felt too quiet. The wind scraped against rusted metal sheets, sounding like whispers. He stopped the car, got out. In his hand was the bag, and beneath his coat, a tiny recording device. No weapons. He didn't want anything to risk hurting Elena if things went wrong. He only carried what mattered, his love, and a heart set on saving her. Inside, Elena sat in the cold, damp room. Brenda entered, adjusting her hair like she was preparing for some important social gathering. "You should be happy," she purred. "You're about to make us rich." "You're sick," Elena hissed. "You're monsters." Carl laughed loudly, placing his gun on the table nearby. "We just play by the rules, girl. Turns out, you're worth a lot more than we thought." And then, it happened. A car outside. Tires stopped. Then a voice, loud and clear through the thin warehouse walls. "I'm here. Alone. With the money." Elena's breath caught. "Daniel." Carl walked out, gripping his coat where the gun was hidden. Daniel stood there, soaked from the rain, holding the bag. His eyes locked on Carl. "I want to see Elena before I hand over anything." Brenda dragged Elena out. She could barely stand, but her eyes, they were sharp. Alive, locked on Daniel like he was the only light left. She's alive. That enough for you? Carl sneered. Daniel set the bag down slowly. Let her go, then we'll talk. Carl bent down, flipping open the bag. The first layer of bills looked perfect, crisp, real, but underneath, fake. You trying to screw me? Carl roared. And then, sirens. Flashing lights, the roar of boots and barking voices. Police! Drop the weapon. Officers swarmed from every direction. Carl turned, furious, raising the gun. But Alina, using the last of her strength, lunged. She slammed into his chest with her shoulder, sending his aim off. The gun fired into the ceiling. Daniel charged forward, tackling Carl, wrestling the weapon away. Brenda tried to run, but was quickly pinned down. Elena collapsed onto the cold floor, shaking, gasping for air, but alive. In the chaos, Daniel rushed to her, dropping to his knees. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he could keep her from vanishing again. Mrs. Margaret arrived minutes later, tears spilling down her cheeks at the sight of Elena, breathing and safe. Daniel whispered into Elena's ear, voice cracking. I'm here, Elena. You're safe now. Elena nodded, then broke into sobs. Deep, uncontrollable sobs. Not from pain, not from terror, but from the overwhelming truth that someone had come for her. That someone had loved her enough to chase her through the dark. The days after the rescue passed in a silence that spoke volumes. Elena stayed at home with Daniel and Miss Margaret, cared for, protected, and above all, given space to simply be. Daniel didn't push. He didn't relive the events or ask her to explain what she felt. He was just there, present, steady. Each morning, he brought her a warm cup of mint tea. Each evening, they sat on the couch together, bathed in the soft glow of a lamp. Words weren't necessary. In those moments of quiet, Elena felt safer than she ever had. Some nights, she woke up drenched in sweat, her heart pounding from nightmares. And each time, Daniel would wake immediately, wrapping his arms around her, whispering, "You're safe now. I'm here." Simple words, but they carried the weight of comfort, healing, and truth. Ms. Margaret, too, became a quiet force of peace. She never told Elena to move on or forgive and forget. Instead, she gently helped her rediscover the small joys she'd once lost. The calm of baking apple pie, the laughter when flour exploded across the counter, the wonder of planting a tiny seed in fresh soil. On a soft, rainy morning, Elena sat by the window, her fingers holding an old sketchbook. The first lines she drew trembled, uneven, uncertain, but filled with raw emotion. Daniel walked over and sat beside her. "What are you drawing?" he asked gently. Elena smiled, hesitant. "A place where I feel like I belong." He looked at the page. There, in pencil and charcoal, was a small house with a flower-covered balcony and two figures sharing tea together. Daniel gently squeezed her hand, whispering, "I hope that place is here." Elena looked at him. In that moment, she understood she didn't have to erase the past. She only had to believe that the present could still be beautiful and the future could still be built. One quiet afternoon, as Elena sat by the window, lost in thought, Daniel approached and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let's go away for a few days," he said softly. "Just the two of us. Somewhere quiet, somewhere you can breathe without looking back." She hesitated, then nodded. He chose a small coastal town, far from the city, where no one knew who they were, where the only noise was the sound of the sea and the open sky above them. The moment they stepped onto the soft sand and heard the waves crashing gently ashore, Elena felt something inside her begin to melt. The sleepless nights were replaced by the lull of ocean wind through the window. Mornings came not with dread, but with golden light, and slowly, with every quiet hour spent by Daniel's side, she began to feel like herself again, or perhaps someone new, stronger, kinder to her own heart. They walked hand in hand along the beach, their footprints fading with the tide. They dined beneath warm yellow lights, saying little but understanding everything. Alina no longer felt like a survivor. She felt like someone truly, fully alive. On the last evening of their trip, Daniel invited her for a walk by the water as the sun began to set. The sky blushed with gold and amber, the wind was soft and salty, and the waves whispered secrets to the shore. Alina walked beside him, her coat fluttering, her hair tousled by the breeze, her eyes clearer than ever. The sky behind him burned in hues of gold and crimson. In that moment, he didn't just look like a man, he looked like home. Then Daniel stopped. He turned to face her, took both her hands in his, and drew a deep breath. "Alina," he began, voice just slightly trembling, not from fear, but from a heart overflowing with love. "You've lived through things no one ever should, but you're still here, still gentle, still brave, and every day with you, I feel like the luckiest man alive." He knelt down, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a simple, elegant ring glowed softly in the golden light. "Will you marry me?" he asked, never looking away from her eyes. Alina couldn't speak. She raised a hand to her mouth, tears spilling before she could stop them. All the pain, the loss, all the things she thought she'd never have, were suddenly right there in the eyes of the man before her. She nodded, crying and laughing at once, whispering through uneven breaths, "Yes, I will." Daniel stood, wrapped her in his arms. The waves rolled on, the sun sank lower, and Elena, finally, had her new beginning with the one who had chosen to stay through her darkest days. On the morning of her wedding, Alina stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a simple white gown. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow over eyes still glistening with emotion. She no longer saw a broken or frightened girl in the reflection. She saw a woman, whole, strong, and alive. Someone who had walked through pain, survived the darkness, and chosen to stay in the light. She remembered everything. The days of silence and fear, the cold betrayal of blood relatives, the endless nights that felt like they would never end. But more than that, she remembered Daniel, how he came into her life, listened without judgment, stayed when it was easier to leave, and loved her gently, truly. Elena had learned one thing. The past might leave its mark, but it does not define her worth. She is not what happened to her. She is what she chooses to become. And today, she chose happiness. As the chapel doors opened, Daniel stood waiting, his smile warm, his eyes just as gentle as the day they met. Alina took his hand, and together they walked forward, the music soft and full of promise. From pain to love, from shadows to light, they had walked through it all. And now, hand in hand, they stepped into a new life, peaceful, joyful, and full of hope.